comedy, pop culture, and everything in between. By idiots, for idiots. Welcome, sinners. This is Sports Idiot Nation.
Welcome into Sports Idiot Nation, all you sinners. Today is November 21st. We are getting ready. It's turkey eating season, but it's always music season. We always talk behind the scenes music. It's just part of our lives. And so we have a special guest with us today. T.I., tell us who he is and what is he doing here?
Sure. This is my pal Josh Toomey here. We share a misery of both being Titans fans. But Josh reached out to me this past year about hopping on his podcast. He had been following the page for a long time. And of course, I was super excited because obviously, like, my second passion is definitely but behind sports is definitely music. And Josh and I got to know each other a little better and became friends. And I had told him, hey, we're finally starting a podcast. When we do, love to have you on as a guest. Took us a while to make that happen just because we've been trying to iron out our details and situations and figure out what we're doing. But here we are. He has an awesome podcast, Talk Toomey. Incredible list of guests. And I had a lot of fun on his podcast. And so, yeah, welcome to the show, Josh. Glad to have you, buddy.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure and an honor. I've been a day one listener to you guys. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, all right, Josh, I want to ask you first. We're talking music. What was your first memory of music when you decided, yeah, this is for me, music. This thing's pretty cool. Like an album, going to the store to buy a CD. Like what was it?
Honestly, kind of going back to growing up in the 80s, my cousins were really big into Kiss. And so when I was 7, 8, 9, I was seeing Gene Simmons in makeup and, Ace Frehley in makeup and watching, Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park and just all the kind of the pageantry around Kiss and almost like, superheroes with guitars and all that good stuff. So I remember honestly sitting in like 88, 89 with a record player and just hitting rock and roll all night over and over on a record and just loving what I was hearing. And then obviously the all the makeup and things like that go along with Kiss made me just really want to be in a band. And actually even at 8, 9, 10 years old, I was starting to try to pester my dad to buy a guitar, buy things for me, buy records, and started to get into it. And then that just kind of goes right into early 91. Metallica's Black album comes out and Enter Sandman takes over MTV and
Rips your face off.
It definitely rips your face off. So I go from all, my cousins are listening to the hair metal stuff and Kiss and all that, but then I hear Metallica for the first time and really hone in on like, oh, this is what I want to do with my life. So it was Kiss is like kind of was the gateway, and the Metallica kind of took it over the top.
Yeah, actually, Adam, one thing that's funny, when Josh and I first started talking about the plans for the episode and just what to talk about, we started realizing that we both had a passion for Metallica growing up when we were younger, and actually found out that we were both at the same exact show. Like my first official concert, my stepdad dropped me off, wasn't old enough to drive, me and two buddies. It was at Starwood, pouring down rain. It's Metallica and Suicidal Tendencies. Supposed to be Alice in Chains. Lane Staley unfortunately went to rehab. They replaced him with Candlebox. But yeah, so it's kind of funny. We were both at the exact same concert, and we're about the same age. So I think that was a really cool connection that we had off the jump. And I still remember that concert. It was incredible. It was back when I had long hair, and me and my buddies were sitting there in the last row underneath the roof, and these guys tapped me on the shoulder and were like, hey, if you guys let us use your ticket stubs, because it was pouring down rain, and they were like, we're going to sneak in there, but we'll go buy you guys some beer. And of course, the two guys I was with were like, no, let's not do that. And I was like, oh, give me your tickets. Hell yeah. And I gave them the stubs, and sure enough, they came back with beers. And the rest is history, man,
The good old days of buying 15-year-old kids beer.
Yeah, absolutely. And paper ticket stubs at that,
Oh, that was the trick, man. That was two people go in with the tickets, and then one person goes out with both the tickets, and then you sneak your friend in with the ticket stub. Yeah, that was the thing. And what's crazy about the Metallica show is actually the 30th anniversary of that show was in August. Like it's been, it's like 30 years and 2 months ago that T.I. and I were at the same concert.
Congratulations, you're older than dirt.
We are older than dirt.
You're not far behind there, Adam. You're not far behind. Miles is the young
but
one
I
of
am
the bunch.
behind, so that's fine. And Miles is being quiet. He knows he was like a baby boy.
We're not even born yet.
But yeah, my first official concert though that I ever went to is pretty hilarious. I think it was 3rd grade or 4th grade. My grandmother dropped my cousin off and me, and I think a second cousin as well. Dropped us off. She stayed there. She didn't obviously attend the concert, but it was at T-Pack, and it was none other than Vanilla Ice.
Nice. Kind of jealous on that one, man.
Yeah, and I mean, it was crazy. He was like up on top of the speakers. He was
Were
like
the
humping
Vegas
the speakers
pumping?
and stuff. Yeah, they were. There were so many kids there. He was like humping the speakers and stuff on top of the really tall speakers, like dancing on them and stuff. I mean, put on a pretty hell of a show, But yeah, that's like my first concert officially by myself. But like I said, my grandmother was still there hovering in the lobby or whatever, But which is hilarious to think that he would played at T-Pack of all places. Like the Performing Arts Center had Vanilla Ice, But that was when he was at the peak. I mean, that was I mean, he was killing it. So that was my first official concert. And then my mom and dad, before they separated, took me with them to see Robert Palmer. And I'm sure that was just because they couldn't find a babysitter. But, but that was kind of cool because that was back when he was doing the videos with all the girls, wearing the same outfits. And he had them all on stage and all that. So that was kind of cool because, obviously that was back when MTV played music and stuff. So, I mean,
Again, you're old as dirt. You're saying MTV had music
before reality television took over.
MTV raps.
But what about you, Adam? I know you have a passion for a lot of like 90s rock and stuff. I know you just recently went and saw 311. Like, what was your first concert?
Yeah, man, and I will say 311 was just this past summer, and they sound still freaking amazing. I was going into it thinking like, well, I'm getting to the age where some of my favorite bands, I just going to have to live with it, that they're just not going to be as good. And holy cow, they just dropped an album last month. I cannot get over how good 311 still is. So I've seen them. I'm one of those guys that has like a bunch of bands that like I could get made fun of, and I'm in a safe space here maybe with you guys, but Collective Soul, Miles knows this about me. Collective Soul is like my all-time favorite band, and I know that is goofy. Like, you don't have to tell me, but like I can't explain it. It was the first CD I bought, Heaven Let Your Light Shine Down. That song was on the radio, and it was just like took over the whole universe at that time. And like I just followed them when they did the soundtrack to the football movie with Billy Bob the lineman, Whipped Cream Bikini,
Varsity Blues.
Yeah, so
Varsity
Have I Got a
Blues,
Long Way to Run? That song. And like, I've seen them 10 times. I've seen them in San Francisco on the ocean. I've seen them in my city now, Fort Wayne, like 4 times. I've seen them in Ohio. But my first concert, I grew up a pastor's son, and so Christian music wasn't like forced down my throat. I was at a vulnerable age where I thought any music was decent if it had the beat and whatever. And I was lucky because DC Talk, I have to say, even now looking back, they were pretty good, not just for a Christian band. Like, they were good. Like, what they were doing was not done a lot. They were my first concert. And I mean, it was pretty freaking awesome. They coordinated the dance moves, all this, so 90s. Now I get it. They're not looked at as like, but for back then, you have to admit, like Jesus Freak, remember that song? I mean, that was on secular radio.
Were you,
I mean,
so you
I'm
like
sure you guys remember
old,
that.
7 or 8 years old, I'm guessing. Something like that.
Yeah.
So what's wild about Jesus Freak and DC Talk is I grew up in Hendersonville, Tennessee, Hendersonville High School. That's where Taylor Swift would end up going. Actually went to high school with Diplo. He went to Hendersonville High School. A lot of prominent people came out of that school, but a friend of mine, actually 2 friends of mine, we had I had a little local punk rock band. They had a little local punk rock band. This would have been, mid '90s, and they wrote this song called Arizona, and it was just it was a cool rock song, but they were recording it with some friends at a bigger studio because as anyone knows in Nashville, everyone's dad is a musician and everyone has a studio, and there's just so much music going on and so many studios going on that some of the guys from DC Talk actually heard the song without lyrics, because the lyrics were actually talking about, like, what do you talk about in high school? You talk about like going to the desert and tripping on stuff and things like that. But they heard the music and they loved the music. So they actually took that song Arizona, and it's on DC Talk. It's called like Live It, Love It, Learn It or something like that on Jesus Freak.
Love it. Like, yeah.
So that song was actually written by two of my high school friends.
I know the exact song that the bass line and everything.
Yeah. It's great. Wow. And it's wild that they, still get, well, one of them passed away, unfortunately, but they still get, money from that album and how crazy big that album became. So yeah, it was wild that our friends got, publishing deals and we were still all in high school.
Yeah, that I vividly remember that song. You got to like it. You got to love it. I know you need some Jesus in your life. That's I remember how the song goes, everything. Yeah. That is really wild, man. That is a crazy story. That's awesome, dude.
Miles, what about you? I know you're the youngin' here, but I'm sure you've been to a handful of concerts,
Yeah, and it's kind of weird because I didn't go to a single concert till I was an adult. And the first concert I ever went to was John Legend in college. And that was
that'd be cool in Bloomington, right?
Concert. And it was at the Performing Arts Center there on campus, and I'll tell you, I left there like 10% gay because like that dude, his voice is just, oh my god, it is.
You're like, that's a handsome man.
Just a voice, nothing sexier than the voice of a black man. It's just he is extremely talented, and the fact that he's one of those voices that it just resonates in person even more than it does over the radio or on an album or whatever. And the dude, oh my god, on the piano, it's just like not something that I'm into or normally listen to, but it's like if you have a pulse, you will enjoy John Legend live.
Sure.
But then over time, Adam, I think the majority of the concerts that I've been to since college were actually with you. Going to like Three Rivers Festival, the bands that you and some of our other buddies were into. I'll admit the last concert I went to was Cher, and it was actually pretty freaking sick. She at 70 years old wearing a thong still looks hot. Not my bag, but she could absolutely rock it and put on a great show. So I think that my biggest takeaway from concerts is, even for either whether it's a band or a musician that I'm like, whatever, I won't listen to them much outside of this. It's like when you are that talented at your craft, it's going to be entertaining to anyone that likes any music whatsoever. So I think that's kind of my biggest takeaway rather from just kind of going to concerts. It's like my favorite all-time bands, like Led Zeppelin. Obviously, they're still playing, not necessarily with their original bandmates, or like Queen not playing with Freddie Mercury because he's kind of dead. But like the opportunity to go to those, I haven't had. I would love to, but just anytime you can hear just an all-time performer, it's worth going to.
Sure.
Because the shows are just so amazing. And then over time, growing up with classic rock with my dad, and then just with the internet age, you listen to everything nowadays. And then obviously being in Tennessee, you get really immersed in the country music culture. So obviously I enjoy that. Haven't really been to any shows here. Going to Country Music Hall of Fame, just seeing the history though is really, really neat. And then, marrying my wife from Brazil, she's every bit of a Christian that I and Adam are. So she introduced me to Brazilian Christian trap music, and it is badass. Is listening to American Christian music, it gets pretty boring pretty quick. Brazil just does it differently, and obviously I don't understand the majority of
because they're still half naked,
the lyrics, but
right.
Well, they're guys, so
half naked for Jesus.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're not all John Lynch.
In their
so, he's
all
not
natural.
He's not excited there, Adam.
Oh
But
man,
the flow, the beat, and just like the Latin rhythm, man, and the soul that goes into it. Just seriously, look up Vichin or Dois Metro. Just you can type in whatever YouTube or any other search engine, Brazilian Christian trap music, and if you're not into it, I don't want to talk to you because it's dope.
that's awesome.
Well, that's the thing that's always been crazy with Christian music too. American Christian music is always like, hey, do you like Metallica? Well, here's a Christian version that's not as good. And hey, do you like Iron? Yeah, like, do you like Iron Maiden? Like, here's Iron Cross. It's just always like, it's always like these watered down, weird versions of popular bands that never live up to the kind of the secular counterparts. Actually, I was going to ask you, Adam, kind of being a pastor's son, did you see this phenomenon that I love to talk about on the podcast? Was kind of in the mid to late 2000s, Christian metalcore, like Christian, like crazy, like what if you play it for your mom, she's gonna be like, that's the devil's music, and you're like, no, actually, we're talking Jesus right here. And these bands would play, they would play church basements, and the youth groups would fund them. Some of these bands went on to become, they kind of shun the Christian side, and they become more secular, and then they're in the clubs, and they're popular now. But a lot of them got trapped in that world of playing youth groups and things like that because the money was so good because they were funded by the church. And I remember like even my grandparents being Southern Baptist, and they knew that I liked heavy music, and they're like, oh, there's a band playing at the church tonight. And I'm like, what? Like, why is there a band playing at our church?
You're like, pass.
I was like, pass. But then, looking back now, it probably ended up being, some band that went on to, headline festivals now or something because of that was their start they got.
It's probably like POD.
Right. Yeah. POD or Under Oath or, any of those bands.
Yeah. I do remember.
Go ahead, Adam.
Hearing of those.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I did not grow up in that type of household. My family was not very religious. My mom was just kind of like, whatever. But she was real young. My mom had me when she was 18. She used to, and my dad, they used to travel around, and she was really into the Police and Sting. And she would follow, they would go to shows and drive around. They had this, I've seen some pictures. They had this old van, like why my aunt was like going to school and making good grades and going to college and going to Cornell and all this. My mom is like riding around in a van and going to seeing all these shows, so it's just so funny. They're polar opposites. But I grew up like really like my first tape I ever owned was Fat Boys Crushin'. It was given to me by one Christmas by my uncle. And then probably the next tape I owned was like Beastie Boys' License to Ill. And so I really kind of grew up at an early age, really kind of digging hip hop. I would say like most of my childhood was spent between hip hop, heavy metal, and eventually gangster rap, eventually NWA, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre. And, as the 90s hit and we started to get the grunge era and things, like I started really getting more into the alternative side, but I was still rocking Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses. Like I remember my mom gave me Appetite for Destruction one year on tape for Valentine's Day. And I remember she took it from me for a day, and I'm sure she was looking at all the stuff and all the pictures. And if anybody, I'm sure Josh is well aware, but the artwork inside of Appetite for Destruction is very interesting. And I was probably like 8 years old. I don't know. But the next day she gave it back to me, and, the rest is history. But I remember moving from Bellevue to Pegram, when my parents split up. My mom remarried, and I had the old, I'm sure they still make them, but the old like black flags, that you could hang up. And I had a Motley Crue one, Guns N' Roses, and I'm in the middle of the country, and I'm meeting these kids in the neighborhood. And like years later, they told me, they were like, yeah, when we first met you, we honestly thought you were a devil worshiper. I was like, because I listened to Motley Crue. Come on, guys. Like Motley Crue's pretty tame, So yeah, I've always kind of had a passion for, hip hop, hard rock, heavy metal. But as I got older, I started, really appreciating all genres of music. It's funny, growing up in the country, like when we would go to high school dances and stuff, they'd always be playing, Garth Brooks and all this crap. And I was always like, oh God, I hate this stuff, but now compared to today's country and everything, I'm like, that stuff wasn't so bad, like a lot better than Florida Georgia Line and, crap like that, So, but yeah, that was my first tape I ever owned was Fat Boys Crushin'. And then I had one of those little blue like kids record players. And I remember my grandmother got me like the I guess the 45 of Hip to Be Square by Huey Lewis, But that's about it. Like, what's the first? I guess you said you really got into Kiss, but like outside of that, Josh, like, was it just Kiss and Metallica, or was there something in between? Like, was there something that really like, okay, this is because I know now. You're more into, obviously I know you're a huge fan of Slipknot. I know your podcast itself is represented by Knotfest, but what kind of led you down like the really kind of hardcore heavy metal path? Like what band did it for you?
Getting into the metal stuff, like we talked about earlier with the Kiss and things like that. It's funny you were talking about, was there anything else when you remember when the movie Great Balls of Fire came out and like Jerry Lee Lewis, played by Dennis Quaid, came out. I was really young and I was really drawn to that VHS. Like I just watched it over and over. So I actually my mom took me to the tape, the record store, and I think she bought a Motley Crue tape, and I bought a Jerry Lee Lewis tape like the same day. And like looking back now, I'm like, what a nerd. What a little nerd buying a Jerry Lee Lewis tape at 8, 9 years old. That stuff kind of got me into music, and then Kiss, and then moving on to, like we said, Metallica, and then Metallica just kind of opens up to, there's this whole world of thrash like Megadeth and Slayer, and going heavier and heavier into stuff like Cannibal Corpse and Deicide and all that nonsense. And then around freshman year of high school, that first Korn record comes out.
Oh yeah.
Actually, I just wrote an article for metalinjection.com about with the 30th anniversary of the debut Korn record coming out, just kind of a love letter to it, because I talk about in the article that when I got into Kiss had already been around for 15 years. And when I got into Metallica, they'd already been around for 10 years. There was a whole back catalog to get into.
Right.
When I heard Korn, they were brand new. Like the debut album just came out. They were my band. Like, they all through high school, the first album comes out. I see them at Municipal Auditorium opening for Ozzy, crazy stuff like that. And then by the time the third album comes out, they're on TRL, that MTV when they play music. I remembers very well.
Just like yesterday.
Right. So
I appreciated Korn big time as well. I was a huge fan of Korn. We actually, like, before every soccer game, me and about 3 or 4 teammates would pile in my car. We'd turn it as loud as we could, and we'd listen to Blind before every single soccer game. And we would go crazy, and it always pumped us up, man. We were ready to destroy some teams after that.
Yeah, we and recently at Louder Than Life here in Louisville, they headlined the last night of the festival, and they're kind of out doing the 30th anniversary, playing a lot more off the first album. And I'd actually taken an edible earlier in the day, and it kind of kicked in right when Korn came on, and I was just like, all the feels hit all at the same time. And I actually wrote a bunch of gibberish in my phone, and I actually texted my guy at Metal Injection. I was like, hey, I want to write a love letter to the first Korn album. And then the next day I opened up my notes app. I was like, what am I writing about Korn like this? I was like pouring my heart out in my notes app about being sappy. I was like, why did I do that? And then the next, 2 days later, Greg over at Metal Injection hit me up. He's like, do you still want to write that article? And I was like, oh, that's why I was getting all in my feels for the first Korn album. So I sat down and wrote like a little love letter. And what's crazy is I posted it on Instagram, and the guitar player, Head, he commented on it, and then like 3 days later he put it in his story. So I don't know if he like commented and then he like read it later, but it was just like, dude, you tell 15-year-old me that one day Heads from Korn is going to be like, thanks, man. I'm like, no, thank you for putting out that first album. It's crazy when those things happen, with social media and things like that, where you become internet friends with certain people, and then they even to this day, there's certain people that comment on things, and I'm like, holy shit, that's the guy from whatever band that's, you know, my friend now or my internet friend. It's really weird how all that works out in the end.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's crazy.
One of my friends is a pretty popular DJ in town. You may have seen his name around and stuff, but
Joe Elvis. Sorry.
His name is Andrew, but he goes by Wicket the Instigator.
Okay.
And he does all kind of stuff. What kind of happened for him was he did a mashup of Danger Mouse and the Black Keys, I think, or no, not Danger Mouse. It was the Black Keys. No, I'm sorry, Big Boy from Outkast and the Black Keys. And Big Boy instantly found it, shared it, blah blah blah. Next thing you know, he's this household name,
blowing up.
He's going on tour, doing stuff. Big Boy invited him to a show, and he came down. And so since then, he's always been doing a lot of stuff. Now he's married, and he's just a resident DJ in town, but he still does all these different mixes and mashups. But recently, he's been doing a lot of classic 90s stuff, a lot of Wu-Tang, and he's been getting a lot of love from all the socials of these artists and stuff. And it, like you said, kind of makes you feel like a kid. You're just like, holy cow, you know? And so anytime I see his post, he's like, man, Method Man commented on this, or like Wu-Tang shared their stories. Like, it's like if you would have went back and told him that when he was putting out his first mixtape ever,
right? Yeah,
he would have been like, okay. And he's actually himself. He's actually from Kentucky originally, so he's from Kentucky here, and you're from here, and now in Kentucky. So
right,
man, hearing that reminds me of a few things. One, Danger Mouse doing the Black album from Jay-Z combining with the White album from the Beatles. When I heard that, my brain fell on the floor. And I just had to pick it up and just digest it. It was amazing. And then, Josh, when you mentioned having like crazy how it's like, oh, you have your internet friends with this guy or whatever, I wanted to remind everyone to be internet friends with us by following us on all social media platforms, Sports Idiot Nation. Josh, real quick, I want to ask you a few other things, but tell us where we can find you on social media as well.
Yeah, most of my stuff is at Talk Toomey Talk. My last name Toomey, Toomey. So it's clever. It's a pun. Talk Toomey. Yeah, just talk to me. Yeah, Talk to me, and then Instagram. I believe I'm Joshua_Toomey. So
okay,
yeah,
cool.
You can find me.
So now we all can be internet friends together. And the other thing that I want to point out that reminded me when you talked about Korn and just how it was your band, because Metallica was already out, right? And when Korn comes out, it's like you're at that impressionable age. And I got to give a shout out to my buddy here, Ken Redman. He always says that growing up, and he's about the same age as me, that growing up was an awkward time for him. He wasn't the cool kid that he is now. He's regarded in our city. He's a local DJ and kind of a well-known guy, but Korn is what brought him to that, because he was always more of on the shy and dorky side. And then Korn was like his band and no one else's. And the lyrics spoke to him, and now he felt like he fit in, and he took it and ran with it. And now he's all tatted and cool and looked at as this dude, where if you would have known him right before Korn came out, you'd be like, oh, I see why this dude gets made fun of. But Korn is like his band. And you talk about writing a love letter. When he hears this, I'm sure he'll be able to say, man, I would in a heartbeat write a love letter. He's got Korn tattoos. I mean, it's just one of those cool things. And it made me think of that when you mentioned that there are bands that you feel like, man, I really feel like they are around because of me and no one else. And that's what makes music like so amazing. And so I wanted to ask you, give us some cool stories from the Talk to Me podcast. Like, what jumps out to you of where you can look back and say, man, I'm glad I did this podcast because.
I've never heard it asked that way. I like the way you asked that.
Well, I am a professional, Josh.
Well, it's funny. Next year will be 10 years of the podcast, and and I'm sure you guys are the same way. You're thinking about next week's episode. You're thinking about what are we going to do next. You're kind of always on to the next thing. You're never really looking in hindsight. So sometimes I'll have to go and look at something from from an old guest or something like that, and it just brings up a list of people you've had on the podcast, and I'm just like, it blows my mind how some of the people I've had on the show. Like last year, not this year Louder Than Life, but last year Louder Than Life, sat down with Peanut from 311. One of my favorite bands too. So I'm right there with you on loving 311.
Dude, that is so cool,
Same
man.
here.
And so I don't know that episode. Now I have to go check out that episode then, right?
Yeah, it's a quick. Those Louder Than Life ones are quick. They're like 10 minutes. And just kind of
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I sat down with them, and it was funny because they were the first. He was the first interview of the weekend, and such a cool guy, man. Such a cool band. And it's funny because Nick Hexum walks in. I'm like, man, that is a handsome man.
Dude, when he takes his shirt off like at shows, I'm like, dude, save some for the rest of us, bro.
I saw a
Go
picture
sit
of him
down.
the other day. I saw a picture of him the other day with his shirt off, and I was like, bro, looks like Brad Pitt in Fight Club at this age.
Dude. Like, leave some for the rest of us, bro.
Yeah,
I'm
both
a huge 311 fan as well.
Yeah, both Nick Hexum and Peanut walked into the media tent, and they're both like 6'3", just handsome. I'm like, oh, is this John Legend concert? What are you doing here? What's going on? Yeah. So I always kind of go back to I got to sit down with Jason Newsted from Metallica for an hour, and it was on the 30th anniversary of the Black Album, which was the album that got me into the band. And so like it's one of those deals where I'm sitting here in the same seat, and all of a sudden Jason Newsted pops up on the screen, and I'm just internally freaking out. And he's immediately cool. He's like, I told him actually, because at the show that T&I were both at, I got backstage passes. I got to meet him that night. He was very cool. I told him I was also a bass player, and he stabbed me with the Sharpie as kind of a joke, and he was honestly trying to remember the show, which is crazy because he's played a million shows. And he's like, was it inside, outside? Was it before the show? Was it after the show? Like he was trying to rack his brain to see if he could remember the night too. And I'm like, Jason, stop. What's what we're here for? Like it's cool, bro. But yeah, that's one that your heart just kind of sinks when he pops up on the screen. You're like, don't mess up, don't be stupid. And any of those dudes that got me into wanting to be in a band. Anytime I get a chance to interview those guys, I'm just always just like blown away. It's crazy. So yeah, so honestly, and I've always talked about this too, like I'm the worst at getting a plan together and then making strategic plans to get the podcast out or things like that. So when I decided to do the podcast in like 2015, like it was literally like, I think I'm going to do a podcast. I'm either going to call it Talk Toomey or Speak to Me. And then I was like, I guess I'll go with Talk Toomey. Ordered a $25 USB mic off of Amazon, downloaded Audacity on my 10-year-old desktop laptop or computer.
Yep.
And then literally like called a few friends I had in the music business and said, hey, if I started a podcast, would you come on? That's like the first 10 episodes of the podcast were just kind of friends of mine. And then even episode 1, I'm like, I didn't say I didn't go into who I was. I didn't go into what the podcast was going to be about. Literally just episode 1 came in like I had been doing a podcast for years. Like, hey, this week on the podcast, we have blah, blah, blah. And, kind of moving on like that. So yeah, definitely was never any kind of like crazy maniacal plan. So with the 10-year anniversary kind of coming up, it's crazy to know that I just kind of randomly started this thing. And then, I did it for like 6 years kind of solo. And then the guys from Knotfest reached out that they were going to kind of turn their knotfest.com from more of a site just about the festival to more of a multimedia site during COVID when all this happened, because they obviously know festivals at the time. So they're like, hey, let's turn this into more of a multimedia deal. And I remember getting the email like how much they were going to pay me per episode. And I almost pulled my car over and just started to cry. I was like, what world is this? What are we in?
Awesome.
So yeah, it's been a crazy ride, and it's like I said, now I'm here with you guys, so getting to speak.
So you've derailed.
Well,
We do
hey,
that a lot
Josh,
on our
I
show.
think
But I
you were
mean, just
debating
the episode you
between.
had me on, when you hit me up, you were like, "Hey, love to have you on." Probably going to pair you up in the same episode with Zach Wild. I'm like sitting over here going, "Do what? Excuse me? Is this real? Is this real life? Like what?" So I mean, yeah, totally. Like, I can't imagine just all the people over the years that you've kind of run into and just getting on the podcast. Even if, like you said, getting interview Peanut for 10 minutes, like that's phenomenal.
Right.
Yeah.
Really cool. But
And Josh, I think.
Oh, sorry, Miles.
Yeah, Josh, I think you said you were debating between "Speak to Me" and "Talk to Me." I think we're gonna have to call this episode "Sing to Me" because I mean, naturally, with the music theme,
There we go.
I think right there, and you could do like a little side hustle. You have your 10-minute short ones. You could just bring people in Nashville trying to get discovered and be like, "All right, just sing to me."
Right.
And you
Like just
use
a
your
kind of
natural
a
voice or X
gladiator,
factor.
thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah. Perfect. Yep. Yeah,
That's
hey,
awesome.
Gladiator 2's coming out, so yeah,
maybe
that's
maybe
perfect.
Ti and I can we'll make a reality TV show out of it.
Let's do it. I'll
I
be
love
Simon
it.
Cowell. I don't mind.
Bloody
But
He's a
awful.
big dad.
But Josh, you mentioned a few times about getting into music yourself and playing in bands. Now I know that you were in Primer 55. I'd love to hear how that came about. Like, love to hear if you got some stories there. I actually didn't find that out from you until after I became acquainted with you and started following your stuff, and I was like, oh, this is super cool. So
Yeah,
love to hear kind of some show stories or just how that all came about. Like, I'm sure that's got some super interesting stuff there.
it's crazy, and it kind of goes to a lot of times I'll have guys from obviously guys from bands on, but they join the band as the band is already going, and it's never, hey, you're gonna join the band and you have 6 months to learn everything. It's always, we need a guitar player tomorrow to play in front of 10,000 people. It's there's never, it's almost like the podcast. There's never like a good ramp up period. It's just like chaos. It's always chaos. It feels like it's never just smooth. The Primer 55 thing kind of came from, I had a local Nashville band called 12 Volt Negative Earth. We played 328. We actually got, pretty decent, got some, record, label buzz, things like that. Did some showcases in that, New York and things like that. And I was in that band for 5 years. That was like from 17 to about 22. Was in that band doing playing with a bunch of basically any bigger band that came through. We were going to somehow open for them. We opened for the Reunited Misfits. We opened for we actually opened for Limp Bizkit once. It was like stuff like that. Any kind of big band that came through, we were going to open for them. And kind of towards the end of that band, I had met the guys in Primer 55 at a show, and when I opened for Limp Bizkit, this was kind of early Limp Bizkit. This was like '97. The first album had just came out. They weren't really, the Faith hasn't been put on MTV yet. Like, they're still underground band. I had seen actually Limp Bizkit open for Korn, so I kind of knew who they were. And so we got the gig to open for him. And so I'm talking to Fred Durst, and he just has like this aura about him. You're like, that guy has like the it factor. Whatever it is, he has. Whatever he has, Will Levis does not have. Like, he has the it factor.
Mayonnaise.
Thank you. So when I meet the guitar player from Primer, his name is Bobby Burns, and same aura. I'm like, oh shit! Like, if you want to go places, you're gonna get with this guy, kind of deal. And a few months later, I see on a music site that they're auditioning bass players. So I was like, holy shit! Here's my deal. So I actually still have the email where I emailed the music site, said, hey, can you hook me up? Can you somehow bridge the gap, kind of thing? And they were actually from Louisville. That's why I live here now. So Primer was in Louisville. I came up here. I would drive, Nashville to Louisville auditioning. Technically didn't get it right away. And so the second album comes out, and they're starting to tour for the second album. And out of nowhere, I had left 12 Volts, and I had like 3 contacts in music. Like, I knew like 3 people. And I was like, hey, if anybody needs a bass player, let me know. And the guitar player Bobby from Primer had wrote me back saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this side project. If you're interested, I'd love to have you." And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "I don't care what it is. Like, I just want to be around this dude Bobby." And so I come up and he plays me. This is how long ago it was. I actually had to drive from Nashville to Louisville to hear the demos. Like, he couldn't just email them to me or Dropbox them. Like, I literally had to drive up here to listen to them, or he would have to like mail me a CD or something. I drove up here to listen to him. I was like, "Yeah, man." So he was like, "Hey, we're about to go on tour. When we get home, we'll start this side project band." I was like, "Sweet, can't wait." And I was working at Domino's, and I was like literally like the day driver at Domino's doing nothing. And I get a phone call and he goes, "Hey, you want to be in Primer? Like, the bass player just quit." And I was like, "Sure, when do we leave?" He goes like, on Tuesday. It was like, 3 or 4 days away. They sent me the set list. I just kind of had to learn it. We didn't rehearse. I think we rehearsed like 1.5 songs. The band itself was very explosive. Like, they did not get along. They hated each other. So we were like 3 songs into rehearsal, and they just kind of said, "Fuck it, load the gear up. We're going to Brooklyn." Our first show was in Brooklyn. And so, yeah, I walk out on the stage, man, and I'm just like, oh, like 2 days, 3 days before I was delivering pizza, and now here I am in Brooklyn, New York at the legendary Lemoore in Brooklyn playing a show. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess this is what I'm doing now. So, yeah, that's when I joined Primer a few days after delivering pizza in Madison, Tennessee.
Dude, that's such a cool story, man. That's awesome. I can't imagine just getting that call. You're just en route to deliver a pizza, trying to get it there 30 minutes or less. Phone rings. You're like, "Oh man,
this is like trying to, wave me down.
Lose my job." It's like, "Hey, you want to go on tour? You want to go play a first show in Brooklyn?" Like, "Yes, please," for sure.
Right.
Bassist players got 30 seconds.
Made of.
So real quick, I want to ask this.
Script.
Oh, sorry, Miles.
No, I was just saying that's a movie script right there.
Oh yeah, dude.
No kidding.
So Josh, I want to ask this because unfortunately a lot of folks in Nashville are transplants. A lot of folks are not our age, so they never got to experience this wonderful place. Miles is younger than us. Adam is in Fort Wayne, but how much do you miss 328 Performance Hall?
Oh man, like I was thinking about 328 not too long ago, and my very first concert I ever saw was the band Cannibal Corpse at 328, and I was 14, maybe turning 15. I went with actually a friend of mine, and his mom took us. His mom was like a rocker, and took us to everything. Somehow got us backstage passes to Metallica. Still don't know how that happened, but whatever. We go to 328 and see Cannibal Corpse, and then we go to the couple shows at Starwood. But I lived at 328. Like I even got to the point where I would go, and there was this alleyway behind the club, and there was kind of nowhere else and it was about a 1,200 cap club, so it wasn't big. It was mid-level size bands coming through. The club got to know me pretty well. They knew I was, and that's the thing, is a lot of those shows were 18 and over, and I was 14, 15, 16. So I would go in the back, and I would talk to the bands, and I'd be like, I'd love to see the show tonight, but I'm not old enough. And they would either A, put me on the guest list, or B, kind of sneak me through the back door and just go through the back door and then kind of go out in the crowd or whatever. The only show I ever went into, and they told me, like, the club owner saw me, and he goes, "Not tonight, man." He goes, "Any other night, I don't care, not tonight." And that was Marilyn Manson on the first out on Portrait of American Family tour. That was like when kids were getting caught cutting themselves at shows and things like that. He's like, I can't do it tonight, man. But I would go and see shows there. I saw Korn there. I saw Life of Agony, Typo Negative, like so many just great shows.
And then you saw 311 many times there because I did.
Yeah, 311. 311 played a like an evening with 311. I think they did 3 sets there. Like they just played a ton of music. And so when I get to 12 Volt Negative Earth, which was only like, I see my first show there in 94. We headlined it in 97. I'm saying, like, so from the first time I saw a show to being on stage at 328, it was only 3 years. As a kid, you think that's a lifetime, but it's always wild to kind of look back and just like when I see my first concert, and that's what I want to do. And then by the time I'm 17, I'm like on that stage headlining a 1,200 cap room. It was crazy.
That's awesome. I saw a lot of good shows there. I saw the origin of Foo Fighters there, like the week their album dropped. I was standing right next to the PA. When I left, I couldn't hear anything. It was really dumb of me to be that close, but it was just the thing, like, you know, we obviously know the tragedy of Kurt Cobain, and it was just like, I was a big Nirvana fan, so I was just like, okay, I'm into this. I was 16, just got my license. Me and a buddy, Greg Dooley, went. Don't know if he's still listening or still around, you know, but I remember getting pulled over leaving there because I went down a one-way street because I'd never driven downtown, I mean, at all. And I was like, well, I'm going to the show. I remember a cop asked, has you guys been drinking? I was like, no, I'm 16. I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, I've never even had a beer, you know. I remember him laughing. But yeah, I saw many 311 shows there. I've seen, you know, this is either going to make or break me on the podcast, but hey, like if Adam's sharing his collective soul, I can share it. But I saw a handful of Insane Clown Posse shows there.
I was there for at least one of those. Yeah. Like, that was wild seeing them in a small club back then.
Oh man, I got hit in the head with a bottle of Faygo, and I remember like looking at me and like either Shaggy or Violent J throwing it at my head, and I think Cottonmouth Kings opened for them. You know, so like, yeah, I've seen a lot of crazy shows there too. One of my friends, although rest in peace, I'm not surprised that he's no longer with us. He actually, at one of the, I think it might have been 311. I don't know, but he climbed, you know, they had that like duck, like the ducks going through. He like climbed up on it and was just like a jungle gym, you know, and they ended up throwing him out. Jason Shoulders was his name, but he unfortunately has passed away. But I still remember as a kid just being like, the hell is Jason doing, you know? But I absolutely loved 328. I was so sad when they tore it down. It's kind of like, it's the same thing with you. It's like, that's where a lot of my really first like memorable concert experiences, like being left alone with my friends and having fun, and, you know, everybody roped around the building waiting to get in, just all of that, you know, like those times have changed. Like, you just walk up to a show now and you go in, and scan your ticket. You don't get that camaraderie that you get. I mean, maybe you do it, maybe some festivals and stuff, but you know, there's nothing like that in Nashville anymore.
Yeah. And kind of looking back at 328 for me, when they tore down 328 to kind of widen the road, I mean, I think that, and then build a hotel, like that was the start to me of the tearing down of my childhood of Nashville. You know, every time I go back to Nashville, it's like, well, that used to be, and that used to be, and you know, what this building is now, well, that used to be. And then we actually did a reunion show in like 2022, and I stayed, we got an Airbnb like in West End, kind of out by Vandy. And I hadn't been out there in years, and we were driving down, you know, Broadway or Church Street or something, and just like every other building, it was just like, that's a building from my childhood, that's brand new. And it was just like one after another. It was crazy how that entire city is just, you know, they're obviously tearing it down and rebuilding, you know, with new modern buildings and things like that. But just growing up in Nashville, I loved the period of time that I was there. I loved the city that it was, you know, I love the city that it's become, but you know, the time period that T.I. and I were kind of growing up there it wasn't necessarily, you know, glitz and glamour like it is down on Broadway now. I mean, I can remember, you know, when some of those Broadway bars were, you know, porno shops, and
oh yeah,
you know, the only thing down there was like the Hard Rock Cafe and Planet Hollywood and the NASCAR Cafe opening and all that nonsense.
Brass Stables is still there though.
Yeah, you can't get rid of the stables. But yeah, it was a great place to grow up. It was a great town to kind of get your feet wet in, trying to build something, like build a band and just really, just to kind of flourish, you know. It wasn't too big. It was like almost the perfect size, you know. Titans came to town in 98, or sorry, 97, 98, 99. You know, that's like my senior year of high school is 97. I remember all the NFL Yes stuff and all that. So it was all kind of encapsulating kind of early what we're talking about, you know, like when an album comes out at the perfect time, or when a CD comes out at the perfect time, you know, it's like the Titans came to town at a perfect time. I agree, you know, just everything was right for the picking at the time.
Yeah, I'm sure you probably did this as well. It was huge. I mean, going to Tower Records at midnight and waiting for the release and waiting there to buy it because they would sell it to you. They would
Yeah.
sometimes, sell it to you maybe 15 minutes early,
I mean, there was Korn played 328 on a Monday night. Me and my girlfriend at the time went to Tower Records and bought Weezer's Pinkerton at midnight. Like that's the how everything's coming together on what you're talking about right there.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
We used to
crazy.
love it. We'd go down as a group and, whether it was 311, whatever album it was, and we would go home and listen to it together and read through the linear notes. And it was just a different time for music. I mean, music is still just as great, but you just there's not that effort, that extra effort put into the artwork, put into just everything. It's like, everybody's probably going to download it digitally anyway. So here's a picture and here's some credits and that's it,
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely miss those days for sure, and you're talking about the Titans, like, yeah, I remember all that. I remember being like, where the Oilers are going to move here. What is that about? I don't understand. I wasn't really a big pro football fan. My grandfather went to Auburn, like I've said on this show. So I grew up watching SEC football and I was very passionate about it, but I didn't have a team. I didn't care. And I was like, all right, cool. And yeah, my first game ever was a preseason game at Vanderbilt against the Redskins when they played at Vanderbilt, and I still have a hat. I still have an old hat. It's like Tennessee football or something. I actually have an old Preds hat before they even had a name. It just says NHL hockey on it, so it's like, it's
Nice.
so wild to think, like, being in the small city we're just like, we're getting these professional sports teams. Like, what is going on? So
Even I remember the smaller side of things, because when you say like Planet Hollywood and Hard Rock Cafe, I actually went to the Hard Rock Cafe in 1996 in Nashville because my dad recorded an album. He's more classical guitar playing, so like Acoustic Alchemy, Gypsy Kings, like that kind of music, and he recorded an album down in Nashville with Jim Allison, and we recorded in his basement. And Jim Allison wrote, 10, 20 #1 hits for like Reba McEntire and like all this stuff. So like we go down in his basement, and in Nashville, I guess like everyone has a recording studio in their basement because it's Nashville. So we get down there and it's just like gold record, gold record, gold record, gold record. Like, and I didn't know who he was. Like, even a lot of people listening, Jim Allison, that name doesn't, ring many bells, but like just to meet him and to hear him tell stories about writing songs for, Reba McEntire and like Bonnie Raitt or whatever was like really cool. But I do remember Nashville downtown as a kid. And then there, just like 3-4 weeks ago, I was there for a bachelor party, and I'm like, okay, this is not the same, And I've been to Nashville a few times. I went just this past season at the opening for the NFL, the preseason. We've talked about that. My 49ers came to Nashville to play the Titans. So like I've been there a couple times,
left with an L.
but it is so different. Nashville is like the construction of like a new sports bars, or now next time I'm there, Jason Aldean will have like a second, like Jason Aldean 2, like we'll have like another, you know what I mean? Like every artist has their, bar top,
for sure,
rooftop bar. It's just a different world.
Yeah, they used to have, and I'm sure Josh, you probably attended them. They were big with my friends in high school and everything. But all the dancing in the districts were great. The Edge of the Cumberland shows, seeing like the Toadies and God, what was, I think, Hum and stuff like that in that time frame. That were just playing Sponge and shit like that. Like free concert. Dancing District was free every Thursday. It was great. I saw.
You probably saw me. We headlined one of those one time. Yeah.
Oh wow, I bet so. Yeah, we would go every Thursday. Like I remember seeing like Cypress Hill and Everclear and just a bunch of just random bands.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I've still got a lot of video stuff. A lot of video stuff of like even playing Dancing in the District. With so we're playing in Nissan Stadium's behind us, or Adelphia Coliseum at the time. It's crazy to look back on all that, and even being a kid going downtown and like the Italian street fairs and all that nonsense. Just almost kind of just goofy it was, and then now everything's just so built up, and and just so massive down there.
I won a beta fighting fish at the Italian street fair one night. My grandmother took me, and my grandmother was so mad. She was like, God, he won this stupid thing. Now I got to bring it home. And I remember that night we had pizza, and before I went to bed, I was like, I'm going to feed the fish, and she's like, okay. Of course, she's not thinking, like, we don't have fish food. I stuck a pizza crust in the water, woke up, fish was dead, of course, and I was devastated, I think deep down my grandmother was like, thank the Lord, Now I don't have to figure out like what I'm going to do with this dumb little fighting fish, But
Dude,
it was
my
like
dad,
you throw ping pong balls into the fish bowls, and if one went in, you got to take home the fish.
dude, my dad, I am 45 years old, and my dad the other day, I was talking to him about something, and he was telling me about he's got this little dog that he's telling me all about his little dog he's got, and he's like, yeah, I've never had a dog, be this close to me or something like that, because it always like comes up on him and wants pets, and they have a little routine down and all this other nonsense. And growing up, we only had one dog ever, and it was my dog for a month or something. And I went to my mom's house for the weekend, and I came home and the dog was gone. Like he told me it ran away. And so, like I kind of jokingly said, I was like, "Yeah, Dad, you let my dog run away," when I was like 9. And he goes, well, I'll tell you the story now. And he goes, your dog got into something and died. But he just told me now at 45 that 36 years ago my dog died. Like he was like, yeah, I just didn't want you to be sad back then, so I told you that it ran away. But yeah, it had gotten into something and like just died over the weekend. It's like, thanks, Dad.
Too much chocolate
farm in the country,
right?
Dude, that's wild.
Hilarious. Well, obviously, we could talk about music and everything else in Nashville for years, but I know that you're a Titans fan. I know it's been a rough season. I know that we share our misery. We text a lot during games. You have a theory on why head coach Brian Callahan was hired. Am I wrong about that? You have a theory you'd like to share with us, correct?
Well, one of my thoughts with Brian Callahan, and I still don't know if he's ready for the job. Like, I still think he might be a great offensive coordinator, but I don't know if he's ready to be a head coach. And I've kind of gone back and forth with when he got hired. I wouldn't necessarily call it a nepotism hire because of his dad, but I think he got hired because he could bring his dad. And I know that, in the initial negotiations, they say that his dad wasn't even brought up and it was never even a thing until later on and blah, blah, blah. But there's an early quote from Rand that he goes, after they hire him as coach, a couple of days into it, he goes, so what's up with Pops? Like Rand was thinking about this the whole time. So it's almost like a 2-for-1. We have a terrible offensive line. So Rand goes, if we hire Brian, he's probably going to be able to bring Bill. And Bill's, always been regarded as one of the best offensive line coaches in the league. So I'm almost positive that Rand hired Brian with like this diabolical plan of like a 2-for-1 to get Bill, even though like they keep going on and on about how it was never, we never talked about that until after I was hired and blah, blah, blah. But I think Rand had it in his brain the whole time. So all the other head coaching candidates that came through may or may not have been better. But I think Rand saw the 2-for-1 there with Brian and Bill.
Hey, I think that could have some legs. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm both ways. I'm right. Maybe he has too much on his plate. He needs a true OC, or maybe it's a little too much for me. He needs to be the OC, but he can't do both, and it's obvious,
the way it's not working out. So
yeah, not working out.
I love when Titan fans cannot just actually say, or maybe the team just is very not good. It's never that. It's always like, well, the coach needs to bring his dad. Maybe it's not like, well, the players we have are not good. It can't be that. Heaven forbid that maybe your players are not superior to the rest of the NFL.
I would say that, but all of our players are on other teams now doing really well. So it's kind of like when they were in Tennessee, it's like, what was going on there? Was it maybe coaching? Was it maybe something else going on? And kind of on that level of thought, it's funny. back, prior to, like kind of the Wilson Hunt era during that era when it was like the Titans were a terrible team, with Bishop Sankey and Jake Locker and all that.
Bishop Sankey is arguably the greatest Titan that's ever lived.
Yeah, that's
top five.
There'll be no Bishop Sankey's slander here, okay?
Well,
carry on.
Sankey free zone.
What I'm getting at with the Bishop Sankeys and all those guys, like that whole team, Mettenberger and all those guys, I was rooting for them every week, but they didn't go on to other teams and have success. Right now, we're living in this hell of we are terrible, and at the same time, like as the Titans are being terrible on TV, I'm getting updates on my phone like, oh my God, AJ Brown just caught an 82-yard touchdown pass, or Derrick Henry's on pace for 3,000 yards. It's just like, it's like every time you turn around, and then not only that, I mean, and T.I. actually posted my thing. It's like every team that has a former Titan on it, that Titan is going to do something great. And so, like, I posted, I sent him a text. Well, yeah, Malik Willis. It's like
against you guys.
Well, even
wild.
I sent him the photo the other day as kind of a joke. I bet $5 anytime touchdown on who was it? T.I.
Haskins.
Was it
Haskins? Dwayne Hassan Haskins. Dwayne Haskins. R.I.P. But the Hassan Haskins, he's never scored a touchdown in the NFL, but he was on the Chargers as the third string running back. I was like $5 anytime touchdown, and they literally got down to the one who trots onto the field. Hassan Haskins, boom, over the top, $85 in my pocket. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Crazy. So.
Adam,
it's just
Adam shot down, bro. It's the staff. It's the coaching staff.
So,
and Will Levis.
I mean, I guess they're okay.
Will Levis is his girlfriend. Will Levis is good. It's his girlfriend that is destroying him. So once he dumps her,
they broke up.
Be on another
they are
team
broke up now. So,
did they? Thank God.
Yeah,
that's why he scored 2 touchdowns.
She's probably sleeping with another Titan that's still causing locker room issues.
Yeah.
No, Will Levis will go to another team and have success. It's the law of physics.
And I would agree with you, Adam, on it's not the players, it's the coaches, but it's wild when you look on paper at like the day one roster of this Tennessee Titans team was like a couple of years ago Pro Bowl team. It's what you got DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard and if you just had a quarterback, distributing the ball properly, you'd probably be all right. And look at the defense, and you've got Simmons and just everybody, L'Jarius Sneed. It's dude after dude after dude, and you're like, oh well, maybe we've got to at least be in the play for the wild card here or something. And then you come out of the gates, and then honestly, we probably would be in play for the wild card if it wasn't for Levis throwing pick sixes to the Bears and not being able to cover anybody in a Jets game, or Malik Willis coming. It's funny.
Having a guy named Colt Anderson as well as our special teams coordinator.
Yeah, they got that guy's a mess too. Or former Titans on the Lions team. It's just wild how often that's happened this year. And the other thing that we were kind of going through, and I will get off this soon, but like every team that we've played, it's like the Bears have fired their offensive coordinator. The Jets fired their coach. It's like, but yet somehow they beat us, but they're still firing everybody because they're terrible. You're just like, it's beyond like comprehension at this point. That
is hilarious. I get to live the opposite of that as Christian McCaffrey comes over to the 49ers right after we beat the living snot out of Carolina. Not only do they send us Christian McCaffrey, but they fire their coach and right after we played them. So it's like I kind of was the benefactor in the opposite way. Sorry. But yeah, Tennessee does have a ways to go. Again, this is Sports Idiot Nation. Follow us wherever you get your social media. Basically, all this means over the last hour is that we could go for another 4 hours. It just means we have to have you on again. And
Yeah.
I don't know what topic even, but we get even more intricate, I'm sure, with music. But definitely, dude, you got to come back on because we could go for easily 3 more hours. I know Ti
Go on
could
Joe Rogan and
absolutely.
do a 3 to 5 hour episode.
Right. As soon as we get paid like Rogan, we will absolutely jump on that. Yeah.
Market.
So,
but before you head out, Josh, is there anything you want to plug? Like anything you want to let everybody know you got going on, or just remind everybody where they can find you?
yeah, man.
Yeah, just check out the Talk Toomey YouTube page. Also, you can head over to the Knotfest YouTube page. Check out a lot of tons of interviews there, tons of interviews on the Talk Toomey YouTube page. So if I want to get that Joe Rogan money, check out the YouTube page.
Yep,
Nice.
we all need it, definitely. So again, Sports Idiot Nation comes to you every single Monday and Thursday, bright and early for your day. So we will see you Monday. Okay, all you sinners, follow Sports Idiot Nation on TikTok, X, and Instagram. Like us on Facebook, and remember, the most fun way to watch us is on YouTube every Monday and Thursday. Be sure to hit the notification bell so you can be updated when new content drops. Remember, the podcast can also be found on the usual suspects of Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Always remember, don't be an idiot.
Sinner.